Welcome to the program today, Heltborg, Parish, located in Land, which, among other small place names and places, consist of the township of Ullerup, Kiestrup, and Ginnerup. Beside that, we have a few large farms, one being Futterup, which maybe is more like an island bridge located at the northeast part of the parish, and also the previous very large estate of Toftum, which for many years in the 1600s and 1700s, particularly in the 1700s, was subdivided into an east and west part. There are many mysteries in Heltborg. I will try to cast some light on today. Not all of them will be solved, but I'm excited to show you about this. Welcome. One of the most exciting finds we have done for this presentation is the tenancy register for the priest of Heltborg. The priest of Heltborg, he resides in the neighboring town north of Heltborg, Visby. It's a dual pastorate. So Visby, Heltborg has the same priest. They have two different churches, but the same priest. And this register demonstrates which tenants he has through the years, and it covers the years from 1712 almost to 1813, but most of the contracts are between 1712 and 1786. And these can now soon be read on my homepage and investigated. These contracts led to further discovery of a few names which are not well known. One of them being Carl, like the Holy Grail. In Danish, den hellige Carl. And there is a place called Carl, which is on the priest's lands. And a gentleman, Hein Hansen, had this land around 1765, and this place is named a few times. There's several other place names which are not well known. Ringborg and Hal is also mentioned here, H-A-L-D. Another exciting thing from the ancient time, which is not new though, is the Jættestue. That is the Bronze Age mount with a large stone setting, cave inside. And here's a picture from a drawing from inside. And here's an old photo from outside from National Museum. And this mount is about 3,200 years old, and it has a few drawings on it, which are very rare in northern Scandinavia. They look, to my view, they look a little like drawings or figures from like Turkey or some place like this. But they find that this it had a little extra cave, side cave to the other large cave, which is very rare, and the drawings demonstrates that this place has been used for about 1,000 years, so about from 3,200 before Christ, 1,200 before Christ to about 200 before Christ. Additionally, the National Museum and others has been digging in the township of Ginnerup and found quite a few houses there demonstrating the life at that time. Here, multiple drawings has been saved from that period of time, clearly showing how life was. This is about 100 before Christ, year 0, and a detailed description has been given that can be studied on the National Museum's homepage. What we are left with in the 16 and 1700 is that not much has been studied. It's like we have lots of papers, we have lots of documents, but we have not organized it in any particular way as far as I'm concerned. And the period after is very well represented basically with the mill. There is a Heltborg mill, if I can just find it, which is very nicely restored. There's a Lau taking care of this one, but that was built, I think, in the mid-1800s. And I think it's a relocation. So this is not pointing back to the time of our work, though it is a Netherland type windmill, similar probably to the mills used at the time we are talking about, the 16 and 1700s. Also new in this presentation is going to be the Svingborg mill, the ownership and the tenancy of that one, and additionally review of Toftum, the large estate I talked about before, the ownership there, and also the tenantship at this very large estate. So in Ginnerup, I talked about before the Iron Age houses which has been investigated. We instead can look at the 1600s-1700s way of living through this exciting map, showing the tiny village of Ginnerup, central Ginnerup, with a clay quarry here, and with a farm situated around like this, following the landscape. And typically we will see a couple of houses for each farm, and then a little structure here which normally symbolizes the kitchen garden, and these small dots here is the stone courtyard. In this one here we have 3 houses, and almost creating an enclosed farm place with a nice little lake for the animals to drink from. And then in this case 2 kitchen gardens, structured kitchen gardens. Then there is a hole here which is larger plants. I'm not sure what that could be, but these are for small kitchen vegetables, and these are for larger items out here in the hole. Everyone has a hole, you see, and a little lake there, more houses, and so on and so forth. All these houses had a thatch roof at the time, and in the stockwork it was called. Another interesting feature we have is the honey hole and the bacon hole. And I could talk a lot about this, but here we have the holes or the storage containers found from around year 0, not far from Heltborg. But here in Ullerup, in Heltborg, we have the names, very interesting names, the honey hole and the bacon hole, called Flaeskhule, Flaeskhule in Danish, honninghul. And I think they basically demonstrate the abundance we have up here in Zealand, but also the meager years always coming after abundance. I think the round one here or another similar one was found in Ginnerup actually. So, of course, we have a story, you know, the way we are, what is that, cheating the Zealanders, we call them people from the Devil Islands, and they, on the other hand, talk about the North Jutland entrepreneurship, which is called nordjysk foretagsomhed. That is kind of belittling. So abundance probably entailed something like that you have to watch over the goods. You have to be taken care of. They are not kind of being spoiled away. So typically you would probably have seen certain families have one of these businesses with one of these containers. The containers likely being situated in the center of the house, protected by the house and the people living there. And they may have contained things like whales, blubber, fat, or things like that, or other seasonal grown or caught produce preserved in these, and then sold in small amounts to the local population. It's hard not to imagine this would not be the case for thousands of years. A further review of Toftum and the ownership suggests a family called Nist, starting in our records, having this farm around 1443. And sometime later, around 1484, it looks like it's a Seefeld family taking over up until around 1600. From this time and onwards, for 100 years about, it's the Kås family, starting with Claus Eriksen Kås, and then through a variety of people and family connections until the final owner from the Kås family, which seems to be, I think it's Mogens Iversen Kås, who has to give it up for the crown taxes, missing payments. So around 1693, it is taken over by the crown, and they, on their side, start to lease it out to what is called rytterbønder, meaning the cavalry, the custodians of the cavalry exercise farms. So this becomes a farm where you exercise the local cavalry. Another of these farms is Kiestrup up in northern Thyland. This is southern Thyland. So I'm not sure how many there was of these ones, but this is one of them. Toftum is one of them. And then slowly a local family starts to come in. First, Peter Thomsen. So I call this entire period Voldborg family ownership and tenancy. So Voldborg, some family members called Jens Madsen Toftum, later Peter Thomsen Barfod, Søren Nielsen, Mads Lavesen, and multiple others. They lease, rent, start to forpagte and all this. And then around, for these 10 years, around 1701, the crown has to give it up and sell it to, it becomes Jens Nielsen, which is a close family to Voldborg Jensdatter. And then it looks like that a variety of people is renting and leasing after 1701, but in 1719 for sure, Thomas Bollesen buys, I believe it is East Toftum, and Niels Jensen keeps the more fat part in terms of land, which is the west. The east has more probably like fish and birds and all this wildlife, and the west part is more manured, macured, whatever that means. So it's more like arable land. And then what happens is a very interesting story. It becomes Toftum changes hands within a close-knit family as Jens Nielsen, he and his wife, Anne Jensdatter, let me see here. Yeah, Johanne Jensdatter. His wife is Johanne Jensdatter, who is, Niels Jensen is half brother to Anne Jensdatter, who is wife to Bolle Christensen. So here we have it, Thomas Bollesen. So Niels Jensen, through his ownership and selling Toftum around 1719 to his, you could say, brother-in-law, Thomas Bollesen, because Niels Jensen is half-brother to Anne Jensdatter, who is wife to Thomas Bollesen. Then starts an era where what happens is that Niels Jensen and his wife dies, and Niels Jensen dies, but before he dies, I think he is making a contract with Thomas Bollesen, so he gets the other half too. So Thomas Bollesen starts to own both halves, and is probably what we could say the last owner of the big Toftum. And he has 7 children, the first one being a boy who dies unfortunately very young. Then he has 6 healthy daughters, the first one ending up being married before Thomas Bollesen dies, and she has a dowry with her, so her and her husband is capable of purchasing the ferry place and the farm, Ferry Farm, Nies Sund Ferry Farm. But his remaining 5 daughters in the house, they end up having a 2-year period after his death where they end up inheriting the east part, the most wildlife part of the farm, and his widow, Anne Jensdatter, she stays on the west part, and then slowly, as the daughters are married away, they either move away, most of them stays, and some sort of take over parts of the farm. And eventually, around, you could say around 1790, the farm is then transferred to all the son-in-laws to Anne Jensdatter. And from there on, the farm is further subdivided and sold off to a variety of different entities as we know it today. So this is really a beautiful story of how you could say women has a big place in how the farm is coming about and how it is inherited and distributed. And at one point, you could say by the widow of Thomas Bollesen, then you have 6 female owning Toftum. It's quite interesting. I have been undertaking an effort into trying to establish where is Flaeskhule located, and I think successfully so, by studying the for sure location of Flaeskhule. Peter Madsen had this location around 1771 as owner by himself, using and owned by himself. And a couple of years later, in 1780, it's subdivided his two tønder and 6 skipper has been subdivided into 1,000 and 1,620, which indicates that part of his land is Flaeskhule and other part is something else. And then from 1788, we find Peter Handberg having the 1620. His name is Peter Andersen Handberg, and his wife is Anne Jensdatter. And we have to assume this is Flaeskhule because the number of the lot is the same as this was 1788, as back in 1780, and further back in 1771 was also number 20. I think as far back to 1755, 1750. Even back 1740 and 1710 it was number 20. But this could suggest that this is the location. And then a further look to a more modern map would suggest that the location now is called Balle and is located at Futterup number 4 by a family called Husband. So we could maybe suggest that someone maybe would be able to contact this family and have a look if there is a hole around there, which could be the Flaeskhule we so dearly sometimes would want to establish. The story today accidentally happened in Flaeskhule or Beckham Hole in 1688. And neither Bacon nor the origin of this dispute is ever mentioned in the court. What we have about this story is about 3 court hearings for this incident where Anne Jensdatter, the mother of the family in Flaeskhule, which is this building we think here, and this one, likely she lives in this building, and the animals goes to the lake here. No, it's going to be opposite. This is going to be the house. This is going to be the lake for the animals, and this is going to be the animal part or the Flaeskhule. Either way. But what happened was that a gentleman who seems to be a sort of strand or beach warden or sheriff, he has been riding up through Heltborg and up to this house, located not far from the church here. So we have it over here. The church is here. The clay quarry is here. You go through like this. And this is today number 4 Futterup Street, called Balle or something like this. A family called Bundgaard is there. So the court document says from May 31st of 1688 that we have the court assembled, which is about 8 hearingsmen, trusted men from all over the Refs Herred, listed here, and we have a complete review, then we have a date a few weeks later. On June 14th, which is a short meeting, and then it's postponed another 6 weeks to the final judgment on July 26th. So the strange thing again about this inquiry is that we have no idea what the matter is, and no one will tell us. So it's understood somehow what is happening. And also the accused Jens Bodsen from Dover, which is south of Heltborg, right up to the Parish border. He is not making any statements and is just accepting his verdict, except he's trying to delay and all this. But I think people are convincing him to not contest anything, because there might be other things in there. We can only guess what that is. But let's say that there is one hint, and the hint is how Anne Jensdatter is being attacked. And very unusual, Jens Bodsen is hitting her eyes. He's going for her eyes and hitting her hard with his fist on her eyes, not on her mouth. So it's not something she's saying. It could be something she has seen. What that would indicate would be that she would say something about what she saw, so he will go for the mouth, but he's not going for the mouth, so she will never say anything about what she saw. So let's say that Flaeskhule was in full function, meaning you would, for example, store sort of either bacon from or similar from pigs or any other animal, or it could be the blubber from whales. It might be like a whale from the beach cut up, and then you can still see this activity in Faroe Islands, but it will mean that people carry this it could be very large chunks of whale fat up to this Flaeskhule and hide it there, but it would have to be a very large one to store any sort of a big whale, or it could be the small whales, more like the what is called marsvin, which means ocean swine, ocean pig, which has which looks a little like what is that? Yeah, they look like dolphins, and they're not that big. Anyway, that's just speculation. So let's go right into the court case itself. And the attorney Søren Nielsen in Ginnerup, who is the Crown Deputy Bailiff in Flaeskhule, on behalf of Niels Mogensen and Anne Jensdatter, which is the party which is heard. And they was presented by Niels Christensen in Ginnerup and Christian Clausen from Ginnerup in Heltborg, who said that on Wednesday, the 8th day before this meeting, they summoned Jens Bodsen Kemp, which is the beach warden living in Dover, and spoke with himself at that time to appear for the court for the investigation of Niels Mogensen, his wife in Heltborg, her wound and injury, and to this day for the same review report which has been, which seems to be present, to be giving a hearing and confirmation in the same case, and appeared after a writing on this, a court-appointed investigation team, which is consisting of 4 men: Christian Poulsen in Overgaard, which is local Jens Laursen, also local Christian Christensen in Sodborg, also in local, and Christian Mikkelsen in Heltborg Gård, which was the last farm at the time. And they were present and raised their fingers to the oath, to the law as follows. So then in the court, the report is written up. That on this past Friday, they went, that's a couple of days after the incident, they went to Niels Mogensen in Heltborg and saw his wife Anne Jensdatter. And as you can see here, no mentioning of the name of the place, which is Flaeskhule or Bækkenhov. So they're investigating her wound and injury, which she and her husband showed them. And they saw that she had a blue bruise under her right eye, which was blood-filled and looked bad and was swollen. And right to the corner of the left eye was a blue spot. And they were swearing oath and outstretched fingers. I think it's something like this, I'm not sure, which is called the Sworhand, which is an ancient way of swearing in all of Scandinavia. You will lose these fingers if you lie. So you stretch them out, indicating they will be taken away if you cut off if you lie. So they want that. So Gregor Sørensen in Heltborg and his wife Miriam Christensdatter or daughter, and then to not confuse her with another Miriam Christens daughter who lives at Heltborg Church, which is obviously very close nearby. So these are the ones who were swearing, and for their truth to win was called the Sunday, May 20th past, about half an hour before sunset, where they saw Jens Boesen Kempf, the beach warden and resident of Dover, that he came riding from the east into Niels Mogensen's farm. So from the map we understand that he would come from east this way at this road and going through the farm here. And he came riding from east into Niels Mogensen's farm and shouted at people in the farm. At the same time, Niels Mogensen's wife Anne Jensdatter walking from Gregor Sørensen's house, which I can't find here, but may be from this house at the back here. Gregor Sørensen may not be the tenant, he may be a sub-tenant or something like this, because his name is simply not mentioned in the matriculus at the time. And she had a child on her arm, and we later understand that this child from the church record gotta be Maren Jensdatter, their child. So, which is about a year old. And she came in the street to Jens Boesen. Then the witness also saw when Jens Boesen assaulted her and made noise and reached for his dagger, and he tumbled about in the street with her. At times she was sitting on her, I think, and it seems on the horse. She had to throw the child she had on her arm to the ground, meaning in the soil of the ground in the street. And she cried so hard and loud and asked if he wanted to engage his fencing sword onto a woman, if he really wanted to do that. And then, for some reason, he rode off to Gregor Sørensen's. Obviously, that's close. And when he left, she held her right eye and complained and said how the beach warden had beaten me, and then she was probably bruised from the beating and bruised in her face. Then came other people here to the court, additionally with equally raised fingers. Johanne Pedersdatter from Heltborg, one that in the meantime the brawling happened in Niels Mogensen's farmyard, she passed by, and there, while walking, and after Niels Mogensen's wife had thrown her child away, she did see the Jens Boesen close-fisted blow to the face, which blows the other witnesses couldn't see since the barn was then between them and the tumbling party. So then the court hears. So this was kind of the entire team of people providing witness statements. And then Anne Jensdatter was present in the court, and she said to the court that it was Jens Boesen who caused her all the harm and blows and injuries. And then they mentioned Jens Boesen was present before the court, so he heard what was described there. So the court ends its description of this incident with that. So then obviously everybody leaves the court, and then a couple of weeks later, 2 weeks later, the June 14 of 1688, we have a new bunch of tinghører. Some of them are equal to last time, but it's a different setting. And the deputy sheriff is the same, that's Søren Nielsen from Ginnerup, not far. And on behalf of the Royal Majesty, his farmer, which is the party being damaged, and again called some people to the court, they foretold these people, it's Christian from Ginnerup and Christian Jensen from Ginnerup, they told the court that 8 days before this one, they had again summoned Jens Boesen, Kent, Steinwarden, and Westland Dover. And at that time, they spoke with her stepdaughter. And this may be why we can't find him in the church records or anywhere else. This is up to now, this incident is the only mentioning of this gentleman. So the daughter must be a daughter from his wife. And they talked to him about the wounds and injury and the act of violence, and they again told that there was this investigation on Anne Jensdatter, and he should come to the court today. And he was present today, so Søren Nielsen sat down and told Jens Boesen that if the court were to go ahead with this, he would be punished with 20 times of 40 loads. Loads meaning loaf or lod of silver. Let me just do this now. One lod is weighing 14.6 grams. 16 lods goes on a mark. So when you come up, it's 32 lod going to 1 pound of silver, and that's approximately a pound in British English American terms. So 1 pound of silver is quite a big payment, and it seems that he will be requested to pay about 3 pounds all together. So he would have to pay 40 let's say loads of silver for the blue blows, and 9th of for the damage, and then for the deed happening on Sunday he would suffer another 3 loads. So that comes to about 100 loads. So the present Jens Boesen recognized obviously that this was the thing he would have to pay, and he required some time to think about this, so the court was adjourned for another 6 weeks. So the court convenes 6 weeks later on July the 26th of 1688, and the entire party from the first court is meeting up. And then the entirety of the previous happenings is being read for the court. And essentially, he pleased no contest. Jens Boesen pleased no contest, and there's no new witness or anything brought forward. So the court established that they will go ahead with this verdict, and in total, they mentioned the court. The paragraphs in the law. This is the sixth book, seventh chapter, and 8th article, and a couple of other ones. And in total, he is asked to pay 101 loads of silver, coming to about 3 pounds of silver, which may be about $600 US today's money, but at the time would be a fortune. So looking further into who are these people, it was impossible to establish any more information on Jens Boesen, but who pays him to be the strand warden or beach warden, sheriff kind of thing. We don't know, but his task would be to ride around on the beaches to salvage any stranded boats and recover. Typically, this was kind of like the dream of finding a gold chest in the bottom of the ship, or other very valuable items such as furs and other things, and try to recover that for his master. And so he might have found things on the beach. It could be, it could be like whales or any other valuable items, but we don't know. But we do find more about Niels Mogensen and Jensdatter, and again, they are clearly living in Flaeskhule in Heltborg. We know that from the church record, which has multiple records about them in this period of time. They are getting married already in 1676, which is about 12 years earlier. We also know that Niels Mogensen at the time of the court hearing has been about plus 50 years old. How old Anne Jensdatter is, we don't know, but she's likely in her 40s because she's having babies some years later. What's interesting is Gregor Sørensen and Maren Christensdatter Krog. They live in Krog, and that has also been hard to establish where exactly that is in Heltborg. But it seems that Niels Mogensen and Jensdatter and Gregor Sørensen and Maren Christensdatter is kind of like a parallel life couple thing, because they are Gregor Sørensen and Maren Christensdatter is married a few years prior to this incident, but they are having multiple kids at the same time, these two couples. So it just seems that they are interconnected, Gregor Sørensen or Niels Mogensen and Jensdatter, Maren Christensdatter, and somehow has been facing up to the bailiff, or you could call Jens Boesen camp, because that's quite a feat to be able to raise up to a man like that, because he has so much status in the society. So this wraps up that story for today. The priest and his assistant, the Dine, are both located, in this case, in Visby. Sometimes the Dine will be located in the neighboring town, so the priest will have the main church, and the Dain will take care of the annex church. But in this case, he stayed in Visby most of the time. We do have a school holder or skoleholder, or school principal, you may say. And so I have created a list of this for administration purposes. And as I mentioned before, we found the tenancy contracts under Visby priesthood in the neighboring town Visby, north of Heltborg. And this helps us determining the tenancy of the priest lands, and most of the priest lands is in Heltborg, because this is what we call annex, or the second farm to the priest, owned by the crown. And these lands are typically subdivided further in smaller farms and farmsteads, so multiple tenants will be around. So that's a lot of people. Also, of course, the priest is the one driving the church records and multiple form of other administration duties. But the priest is located in Visby, and we will take on which priests were there in Visby. Here in Heltborg, further we have the church, and a review of that one from the National Museum, and they mentioned that this church was dedicated to Saint Peter. I've not been able to kind of confirm the devotion to this figure in the town, or any sorts of like major signs of this. Again, there is some spread out signs of ancient times on the church, in the rock stones, the granite there, but not any sort of coherent events we can talk about. The only names mentioned here related to local people of any sort of significance is the people at Toftum. There's a few couples mentioned there, and I have clarified this on my papers on this one. There is another gentleman who has done a pretty good job at registering people related to Heltborg, Ullerup, Kiestrup, and Ginnerup, and that is Nygaard. He had a massive cartotek of notes about people. So a review of this demonstrates he had hundreds of people related to Heltborg, and listed their names and dates and who they were, and that's very helpful. So what we start to gain is some sort of like a deeper understanding of Heltborg. Here I was able to create a review of owners and tenants of multiple places in Heltborg, the chapel, and next priest's farm who was there, multiple other farms, Krogborg, Gadegård, Solborg, og Lodborg, og Heltborg Mølle, etc. But what is also extremely important is that this map here, which is a review of all tenants and owners and lots in all of Heltborg. With coloring, I have been able to connect the dots. So across the board, showing who is where. and create red lines and coloring lines through all. Flaeskhule, we talked about the bacon hole. It's always about number 10. And the honey hole, the honey is typically one of the last ones mentioned in the names there. So this way we can significantly reduce the unknowns, the farms which are hard to determine the location of. This wraps up our presentation for today. Next time is going to be Ginnerup, which is a parish to south of Land. This is part of a large effort, a large series of reviewing all parishes in Land. And I encourage you to check out the other videos on this site, carlmadsen.dk, in YouTube, where multiple videos already has been uploaded. They will come consecutively every couple of weeks or so, as we are capable of, for doing the drones and gathering the information and organizing it for you. So I hope you would take your time and check if you will enjoy some of the other videos. You are very welcome, and please feel free to contact me anytime at carlmadsen.dk. Thanks very much for this time. It was a great pleasure to present these stories. See you.